We're going to talk about a topic today that I think a lot of artists are very concerned with and tend to get very stressed out about. And that is this idea of how to develop your own art style. It totally makes sense because if you think about it, the reason why an artist becomes very well known is largely because they have something that they're doing with their artwork, whether it's the material they're working in or the subject matter or both, that is really distinctive. That you can look at a single artwork by that artist and go, that is definitely a Norman Rockwell drawing. You can spot it from a million miles away. But the thing is, getting to that point, I think, is a very long journey. And what I'm seeing a lot nowadays, and I don't think social media is helping this at all, a lot of young artists, people in high school, people in college, they say to me, look, I'm really worried because I feel like everybody around me already has a really established, very distinctive style, and I don't feel like I have any style at all. And that worries me because I think that style really should be something that evolves naturally. You can't wake up one day and say, today's the day I'm going to find my art style. Or you can't say to yourself one day, my art style is going to be this. I'm going to draw like this from now on, and that is the way that I am going to be known as an artist. Style develops over time. And when I say time, I'm talking years. I'm not saying a couple months even. It really is something that should just happen to you. And I think the problem is a lot of the times when people see artists and their work, they're only seeing the work that they're really known for. You don't really get to see the evolution of how an artist started out and then all of the many changes because a lot of people just don't see that really, really early work. I don't have a slide of this, but if you think about Pablo Picasso, who is very well known for those cubistic paintings, he actually used to do very representational paintings early on in his career. And he didn't just switch to cubism immediately. That was a natural evolution of number of influences and interests that he tried to pursue. So what I'm going to do in this stream, I'm going to talk about examples of styles, how those artists got there as much as I possibly can. I'm going to show you tips for what you can do to evolve and develop your own style, some actionable things that you yourself can do as an artist. And I do think this is applicable to people of all ages because I feel like I'm a little bit different because I never really have had a style. From work to work, you really cannot always tell it's mine. And I know some people might disagree with that, but I am actually going to show all of you later in the stream artwork I did in high school, college, post grad, master's degree, the stuff I'm doing now. And I think you'll feel a lot better about not having a style because I don't really, and I jump around a lot. Oh, hey, Tammy, thanks for jumping into the chat box. If you are here, get into the chat box. Tell me what you think about this topic of finding your own artistic style. Tell me what's worked for you. What have you noticed? What are some of the things that really stand out to you in terms of an artist really defining their own style? All right, we're going to start out with El Anatsui, who is a contemporary sculptor. One category that I think is common in terms of determining your style is finding a very particular type of material that you work in long term. These El Anatsui pieces, they feel epic. They're gigantic sculptural pieces. And this is a detail of one of his pieces. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but they're made out of recycled items. So, for example, he has all these aluminum cans or bottle caps that he collects, and he has a huge group of workers who then assemble it for them. And I think what's remarkable about his work is that it is made out of essentially recyclable items, things that people normally would toss out. But if you look at the scale of the artwork and also just this beautiful sheen and glitter that happens from the work, I feel like El Anatsui's work feels almost royal. It feels very grand. And that's why I think up close, it's shocking to see, oh my gosh, this is actually woven out of millions of bottle caps, something that people would normally throw away. And so sometimes if you have a particular material that you are really laser focused on, that can be a very quick way to define your work. And if you go back and you look at the El Anatsui pieces, you can see they do follow a little bit of a pattern because they are these like draped almost tapestries. I mean, granted, they are made out of metallic items most of the time, but you can see they're not rectangles. They're always draped in a sculptural way. So that's sort of what you expect to see when somebody says El Anatsui. Here's another contemporary Japanese artist, Shiharu Shiota, and Shiota does these incredible installation pieces. And I actually was lucky enough that I did get to see Shioda's artwork. It was at the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis University many years ago. And what I was really startled by in the work is that in the photographs, the string that Shioda uses to create these incredible constructions is the most boring, ugly, run of the mill, average yarn that you just would get at some store. And so when you get up close to a Shioda installation, it almost feels pedestrian because the material is so dull and boring inherently. But the thing is, the scale that Shioda works on and the complexity of installing all of those pieces of yarn together, it really transcends the material. I mean, the yarn really turns into something else completely. And so if we go back and we look at the Shioda images, you can see that sometimes the string is red, other times it's white. Sometimes it's red, but in a very different direction, like these are very vertical. And then this one is black string. So sometimes it's like you pick a material, but within that material, you have a lot of flexibility. So you can try red string, black string, white string. And I think sometimes what happens with determining style is people don't really know, well, is this too much variety? Is this too monotonous? It's very tricky because I think that's really the challenge is if you start being too repetitive with your style, people start to feel like, ah, I've seen that a million times. I don't really feel like there's anything new here. But if your style is too all over the place, people don't really feel like they know what to look for. And I feel like a good comparison for that would be like musicians and bands. Like if you had U2 start to work on a reggae album, that would just feel weird and strange. So you want to make sure you're like within your area, but also not make it boring for people at the same time. Here is a wonderful Cambodian artist who I discovered a few years ago because they had a show at the Metropolitan Museum, and this is a beautiful woven rattan technique. I don't know anything about how these are actually assembled, but you can see some of Sopeep Pitch's artwork. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. Some of them are smaller in scale, like this one has a more delicate quality to it. But we also have pieces like this, which just feel grandiose and just have a massiveness to them. That's really, really exciting. I mean, I really enjoy this material because it's extremely lightweight, it's very strong, and so it really has a flexibility about it that other sculptural materials do not have. And so you can see the forms are actually pretty similar in that a lot of them are organic. This one almost feels like it could be a flower. And so you can sort of sense from the imagery that a lot of these feel like they are organic forms in nature. So that's another theme. But the thing is, within organic forms in nature, I mean, wow, there's no end of organic forms in nature. And so it's like you have to find a very targeted subject that still has endless possibilities. All right, let's take a look at artists who do a very particular type of stylization, particularly with the human figure in terms of portraits and figure paintings. I feel like that's another way to really recognize an artist's style. And those of you who are watching right now, tell me in the chat box, Do you feel as an artist that you have a style? Or do people maybe tell you you have a style, but you don't feel like you do? Because I always feel that way. Like I look at my artwork, I was going through the slides today, getting stuff ready for the stream, and I was thinking, I don't think I have a style. But then people are always telling me I do. So it's a little bit strange because it's hard to get outside of your head as an artist. So I want to know from those of you who are watching if you feel that you have a style or not, and what you think about that. If that bothers you, if it doesn't bother you. I have never really cared about having a style because my career has not been dependent on that. I know for a lot of illustrators, it's hugely important to be active in the industry to have a very defined style. Let's see. Andrew Hill is saying, I'm too young in my art path to feel like I have one yet. That's good, Andrew, because when high school students or college students say to me, oh, yeah, I totally know what my style is, I'm like, it's way too soon, guys. Like, just take your time. It shouldn't be something that you force on yourself. All right, this is a caricature artist, Al Hirschfeld, who was in the beginning of the 20th century. And he was very famous for doing these caricatures. Oftentimes, they were people on Broadway, so Broadway stars. And for example, this is an image from Casablanca. So he did a lot of celebrities, a lot of movie stars, that type of thing. But I love his caricatures because I think some people really think about caricatures as being sort of brash and obnoxious and over the top and silly. And I feel like Al Hirschfeld's work, it's so elegant and graceful and fluid. And those are all qualities that I don't think people associate usually with caricature. So you have an artist, Al Hirschfeld, who's working in a genre where people have an expectation to see something done a certain way. And here he is doing something totally different. I mean, did you ever think that Elton John could look this flowy? I mean, the line work in Hirschfeld's caricatures, I almost think about them as like a slippery fish or like this waterfall. And so that's very unusual. You don't see that very much in caricature. Let's see. Sylvia Cheeseman is saying, I'm also pretty young into it. I feel like I don't have a style, but also kind of force myself because social media seems to value more consistency. Yeah, see, that's what really bothers me because here's the thing. My Instagram is a little bit all over the place. If you guys want to know what my handle is, I'll just put that in the chat box so you can find that. My Instagram, I'm lucky that my name is not very common. It's just at Clara Lou. But I know that because my Instagram's a little bit all over the place, I'm probably not as fun to follow because I think a lot of people do have that expectation on social media. Oh, this is the artist that I'm going to see Screaming Skulls from. And the thing is, I know some people follow me for my fine artwork that is darker and more atmospheric. And so when I travel to Vancouver and I post an image of a Chinese restaurant drawing in colored pencil, they all go, what? It's a little bit disorienting. I don't care because I don't want to sacrifice any creative possibilities because I'm worried about how it's going to look on social media. And so I see that pressure with young artists today. And I don't mean just high school, I mean like post grads, people who are getting started with their careers really worry about that. And it bothers me because I think it's a problem for a lot of artists to feel that limited. Here is another Al Hirschfeld piece, and you can see the format of this drawing really different because this is a huge group of people. I'm pretty sure this is the Grateful Dead. Could be wrong. I don't know the Grateful Dead that well. If anybody recognizes the celebrities in here, just let me know. I'm pretty sure it's the Grateful Dead. But even in a composition like this, which has many, many figures, you still recognize this as an Al Hirschfeld piece. And that really, I think, is the test, is if you can take an artwork from that artist that you've never seen before and look at it and say, that's Al Hirschfeld, that's when you really know that somebody has a very distinctive style. By the way, for those of you who are interested in character design and caricature, we do have this wonderful character design tutorial on artprof.org. Kat Huang, who does the tutorial, she uses pencil and ink and Photoshop, but she also does an amazing job brainstorming the design, talking through the decisions, and the ideas is great. Let's see. Marlena Bromswig is saying it is the Grateful Dead. Oh, thank you very much. I really should double check that stuff in advance. Tammy's saying I admire a certain style and take from that, learn from it, but I'm afraid to be accused of copying. Yeah, it's challenging because I definitely have seen work where I look at it and I say, oh, that person's totally trying to rip off Maxfield Parrish or something like that. And so you got to be careful because, of course, I really believe in looking at other artists and being influenced and just absorbing as much as you possibly can. That's a hugely important part of your artistic development. But it is a bummer when you see stuff and you're like, oh man, that is not original. Or like, for example, I had an illustration professor who was very successful in the 80s. He was so successful as an illustrator that he said art directors would actually hire other illustrators to like do his style because it was cheaper than to hire him. And so you will see that a lot. You'll see like an illustrator who does very, very well, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing that same thing. I'm not into that. I'm sure that some people, maybe it's profitable. I don't think it's very fun to do that. So sometimes people are deliberately doing that to get gigs. But to me, that's not very satisfying. So it's, of course, everybody's decision. But anyway, here is another artist who works with the human figure and stylizes it. And Pat Keck is an artist. I can't remember if she lives in Vermont, Maine, or New Hampshire, somewhere in northern New England. And she's not as well known as I think she should be. I think she's an incredible artist. And also, the thing to know about Pat Keck's work is that a lot of these pieces are kinetic. Like, I think this sculpture actually smokes for real. And I think there are other pieces that have like movable parts and stuff like that. So I'm probably not showing you half of what's actually going on. And these are all hand carved puppets. Like, they're all carved from wood, which is insane. That is so much work to create pieces that are this polished. And you can see from looking at Pat Keck's sculptures that each sculpture really is its own character. But there are similarities. I mean, the first thing is, I would say the clothing is pretty distinctive. The figures are creepy and they all have white skin. You don't really see some that have like natural skin. In fact, I feel like this guy back here has gray skin. It's a little bit of a light gray. Anyway, the point is, Pat Keck doesn't use naturalistic skin tones. And so that's very much a big part of it. You notice a lot of them have hats and the hair is made out of like a fabricy thing. And then I think for movability reasons, the fingers also have this marionette like look. And I always feel like her puppets, they look like they're just staring out into space. And I love these pieces. And even though the shapes of the faces are different, they all fit within the same language. And so that's another really cool thing. And if you look at, for example, Al Hirschfeld, who we were talking about earlier, he doesn't use any color. And so that is also contributing to his style, is that he chooses not to use the color because color complicates things. And actually, if you look at Pat Keck's pieces, you'll notice that Pat Keck does not use a crazy amount of color. A lot of these are pretty monochromatic. A lot of them are variations of gray and black, although I have seen some of her work have really bright colors. Just the pieces we're looking at are fairly black and white. Joshua Daniel is saying, love these videos, pursue fashion design, love to watch these videos and apply what I learned in fashion, but also am currently experimenting with other media. Oh, that's great to hear, Joshua. Thank you so much. I love that you're experimenting with other media because my feeling is that if you're an artist, everything you do is like a big pot of soup. It's all going to the same pot. And so sometimes I have students say things to me like, oh, I went to art school for ceramics, I changed my mind, and I want to do painting now. But that frustrates me because I feel like all that time I spent doing ceramics was a waste of time. And I say, it's not a waste of time because that is going to contribute to your painting language. And so I think strongly, you cannot do anything as an artist and not have it not influence you in some way. And sometimes it's stuff that you really think is never, ever going to come back. And then literally 15 years later, you're picking up that wood chisel and doing a wood carving based on a winter session class you took in the 1990s. So it's like you just have no idea when some of these materials and some of these concepts will reemerge. Okay, Alice Neal is a great painter and another painter who I don't think is appreciated as much as she should be. And her work is very unusual because it's definitely realistic enough that you can recognize the people in her paintings. And she's done a lot of very famous portraits. Like she has this one of Andy Warhol that has like a scar down the middle of his chest. And her pieces, I think, they don't have a lot of modeling or shading. They're actually pretty flat paintings compared to say somebody like Vermeer. Well, everybody's flat compared to Vermeer. But anyway, if you look at Alice Neal's work, you can see there's a real awkwardness to them. And I think it's all in the proportions. The proportions are so bizarre. And a lot of it has to do with point of view. Like, for example, if you look at the woman on the left hand side who's wearing a red hat, you almost feel like you're above her looking down. So there's this like foreshortened point of view that you take on when you look at that figure. And then things like the woman on the left with the blue pants, like her shoes feel way too small and her head looks too big and heavy. And so I think for me, a lot of Alice Neal, it's in the proportions. The Also the weight distribution, I think, is sort of awkward too. Like sometimes it feels like one leg has a lot of weight and the other one has none. This is a beautiful portrait. This is a Faith Ringgold. If you've never seen Faith Ringgold's artwork, look her up because she's an incredible mixed media artist. And I love how rich her work is. And actually, I got to hear Faith Ringgold speak because when I was in graduate school, I went to this very nerdy printmaking conference. It's called the Southern Graphics Council, and they have an annual conference. It's like the printmaking conference. Like everybody goes there, and that's a printmaker. But she spoke at this panel, and she said this one thing that really stuck with me. She said the whole thing about being an artist is that you have to outlast everybody. And every time I think about it, or I get discouraged or think, oh, what's the point? I don't know how this is going to go. I just think about like outlasting everybody, like just stick around. That's such a boring thing. You know, a lot of people like to talk about follow your passion and do all these. And I'm like, just stick around. At some point, somebody's going to notice you. And I don't know. I sort of like how mundane that is. It was really inspiring. Here's another Alice Neal piece, and part of it's also the facial expressions. It's not just the proportional relationships. Like the baby's so weird. Like the baby is so bizarre, that face. But the thing is, like, I feel like I've seen that face on babies before because babies are funny looking. Like they're not always cute when they're born right away. Some of them look like little aliens when they're born. And then if you look at the way that the mother is like holding the baby, even that feels strange and awkward. And so I've always really liked Alice Neal's work because the awkwardness to me feels like she's celebrating everybody's flaws. Like she's not trying to idealize anything. And from my point of view, I interpret that as a very honest portrayal of somebody, that you're really showing somebody as they are. You're not trying to smooth out their edges. The ancient Romans were into that too. A lot of their sculptures are very funny. Like I feel like a lot of the ancient Roman busts, they look like people walking around the street. Like you look at an ancient Roman bust in like the Capitoline Museum and you're like, that looks like the construction worker I saw outside. And it's because the ancient Romans were into this theory, warts and all, which basically means you don't idealize people. You show them exactly as they are. And I feel like Alice Neal definitely does that. All right. I would also say if you guys are interested in painting, we do go over everything you need to know in terms of materials, in terms of preparing canvases, all that stuff. So you can go to artprof.org. Remember, our site is 100% free. You have full access to it. So check this out. Now, another way that you can distinguish yourself as an artist is also in terms of narratives. So we're getting a little bit further away from the look of the work. I mean, this work is definitely distinctive. This is Mark Tansey. who is a contemporary artist. And Mark Tansey's work, it's the type of painting where if you described to me what his work was, I would just think, oh my God, that sounds really dumb and corny. Because the thing about his work is that he takes these like plays on stories. For example, or he does things with phrases. So this painting is called action painting. And so we have this scene at the bottom of all these painters. They look like they're having a good time and they're probably going to be there for a while, many hours. But then you look at the scene that they're painting, and it's a rocket ship that's taking off, and you can actually see in their paintings them painting the rocket ship. And of course that makes no sense because a rocket ship is only going to take off in like a minute or something. And usually I think most people who would try to tackle something like this, it would just come out so cliche and silly. But I think a lot of it is like the painting technique that he uses. I think the fact that his paintings are monochrome, they almost have an antique look to them. And he's so nuanced in his painting technique, and it's so epic and beautiful that I think the combination of those things really helps him out. Like, this is a piece which is a contemporary take on the doubting of St. Thomas, which is a religious story from the Bible. I'm not going to explain it all the way, but it's basically where somebody doubts that Christ has come back to life. And so he like puts his finger into his wound to make sure he's actually really there. And so this is a take on that. This is a husband and a wife, and there's a crack in the road. And this guy is going, I don't believe there's a crack in the road. And so he sticks his hand in the crack to make sure, wow, there is a crack in the road. So that's a play on that. And I see that a lot where people take really well known biblical stories or stories from a long time ago and they try to do a contemporary take on it. And sometimes they're very exciting. Sometimes they're wonderful, but sometimes they're just bad. And you're like, oh my God, why did I have to watch that? And I don't know. I'm so skeptical when it comes to stuff like that. Like most of the time, I just roll my eyes. But I think Mark Tansey does it exceptionally well. Here's another piece, and this is a take on the Garden of Eden. So this is basically Adam and Eve. They have gone out to their swank cocktail party. You can tell from her dress and his tuxedo. They've come home to notice that, ooh, somebody did not give them the keys and they cannot get back into their garden. I mean, how funny is this? Like, I think the funny thing about Mark Tansey's work is that there is like a little bit of a dry humor in there. But like, isn't this a beautiful painting? And you know what's amazing about Mark Tansey's paintings is that it's one color. Like the white that you see on her dress, that is the white of the canvas. Isn't that insane? It's so luminous. And I know this because in high school, there was a huge show of Mark Tansey's paintings at the MFA in Boston, and I saw them. These paintings are big. Some of them are like 15 feet wide. The figures are life size. They're really extraordinary. So look at Mark Tansey. He's one of the most intelligent artists working out there. And so that's sort of what you expect when you see a Mark Tansey painting is you expect to see a play on something, whether it's a play on words or if it's a play on a visual. Like this one is this like rocket going up, and then you have the similarity of the silhouette to the tree. And so that's another play. Look him up. He's a really, really cool artist. Okay, now another artist who works with a very particular genre of narrative, another way to distinguish yourself. Like if you want to say, I'm an artist and I only do folk tales, or you could say, I only do nursery rhymes, or I only do Norse mythology. It's like whatever genre of narrative you want to do. Let's see, Ayodeji is in the chat box saying, whenever I think about biblical paintings, I feel like they've been exhausted to the point everything's cliche. Mark Tansey is really amazing for showing a new way to depict biblical stories. Yes, it is very hard to have a fresh take on biblical stories. Like actually one person who I felt really bad for, I'll put this name in the chat box because you guys should check this out. So it's Barry Mosher's Bible. Just look it up. Barry Mosher is a contemporary American illustrator, and he did an interpretation of the Bible, whole set of something crazy like 50 wood engravings. Wood engraving is so difficult, and it got totally panned. Like people hated it. I mean, you're sort of asking for it if you're illustrating the Bible. People are obviously going to have very strong opinions about that. But people were saying things like, "Oh, Christ looks like Frank Zappa," and oh my God, they just crucify. I did not mean to say that. They just like totally were all over him about that. So it's hard to do stuff like that. Actually, in terms of movies, can you guys think of a recent movie? Well, maybe not recent, just any movie that takes like an old story and is like a contemporary take on it that you thought worked well, because I think it's hard. Or maybe tell me one that you thought was a car crash. It's definitely those two. Because actually, the one that I really remember distinctly when I used to watch movies, because I don't anymore, I don't have time, is if you guys have ever seen that version of Romeo plus Juliet that had Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes in it. I'll put it in the chat box so you guys can look it up. So it's Romeo plus Juliet film, let's see, with Leonardo DiCaprio. That was back when he was cute. He's not so cute anymore, in my opinion. Maybe it had something to do with that I was in high school and he was cute back then. I don't know. Anyway, that film definitely had an impact on me, and I just loved how fresh and strange and unusual it was. And I think it also helped them in that movie that they kept the original prose. So that was sort of strange because you had guys hanging out in Hawaiian t-shirts and at the beach, but they were speaking Shakespearean prose. And so that was sort of a nice combination of things. Okay, so Norman Rockwell was an illustrator. He did a lot of covers for the Saturday Evening Post. I'm sure you guys have seen his work before. It's so just iconic American scenes. That's pretty much Norman Rockwell. So something like this, which is like, okay, Americana, homey, a little bit humorous Thanksgiving scene. Here's another one, and it's very dated. Norman Rockwell's work is always from that particular time period. Like he wasn't somebody who did like sci-fi or historical illustrations or anything like that. And so that really makes a big difference, that not only is it a particular place, it's America, but it's also a particular time period. So time period and place, another way to create your own style as an artist. Let's see, Lahona saying, sometimes the style is subtle. I had an art and craft store years ago. If customers liked one item, they would like all by that artist, regardless of media. Visually, there would be no relationship. That's true. You know something, Lahona? Because I am the same way about a lot of chefs. I don't know if you guys know this chef. He's a chef he lives in France, but he trained in San Francisco. I'll just put his name in the chat box just in case you foodies want to know. So it's David Lebovitz. And he's amazing. Like I'm a big foodie and I am trying to like cook through all his recipes, which I never will. But the thing is, anything he says, I'm like, yes. Like I want to hear anything he says. Like he will say something silly and I want to know. Like I think it's like that degree of, what's the word, devotion to a certain artist. And there are some artists I feel that way about. It's like anything Kathy Kolowitz made, I will love it no matter what. Like, I mean, I probably will love it for real, but I do think some people have a devotion to certain artists or celebrities or people that they're looking at online or whatever, where you're just like, okay, all standards go out the window because it's this one person that's incredible. Let's see, Joshua Daniels saying, next project, I want to make a piece showing interpretation of the movie In the Mood for Love. Oh, I have not seen that movie, Joshua. Is that a contemporary movie? Guys, I have not watched movies like since my kids were born, so sorry. I don't know what's going on. I do watch Michael Fassbender movies, but that's an exception. He doesn't have anything coming out for a while, so I'm very sad. Unicorn Creation says, one of my friends is an artist of the class, said that she doesn't know what kind of art style she's doing. That totally makes sense to me because I think as an artist, it's really hard to know how your work is being perceived by other people. Because sometimes I'll do something and I'll say to myself, oh, this looks terrible. I don't like this. And then I bring it in and I show it to people and they really like it. Most of the time, my personal taste on my work does not align with what everybody else likes. Like I did this painting. I'm going to show this again to you guys later because I'm going to talk about my own development. So I did this watercolor painting back in August of this bread that my mother-in-law makes. And to me, I was doing it to shoot a tutorial and I had fun doing it. But like I posted it on social media and like so many people commented. But actually, you know what really drove it home for me was that I showed this painting to one of my former professors who I'm still in contact with, and I was blown away when he said this. I mean, I like totally worship him, but like he said to me, "I think that's one of the best paintings you've ever done." And I just went because I sort of have an inferiority complex about my painting skills, and so I was like, "Oh my god." And like I did not think about this painting as anything great, but I trust my former professor. I don't always trust social media. That's the thing is I always take social media reactions with a grain of salt because I don't know that they're always that accurate because I mean, if people are clicking on images of paint being smeared with a palette knife, I mean, who knows? Okay. Ayodeshi is saying, I don't really know many movies that put a strange twist on old stories or mythology stories. I know a lot of books. Oh, that's a good example. Yeah, a lot of books are definitely great examples. I'm really glad you brought that up. Every Rick Riordan book is an example. He's an amazing way of showing old mythology gods in modern life. Oh, that's a great example, Ayodeji. I have not read those books, but one of my kids was reading them for a little while. And there actually was a lot of criticism against Rick Riordan because a lot of the literary scholars, they thought he was like dumbing it down. But I am a big fan of doing that because it's like what you're doing is you're making an old language and an old version of stories, you're making it accessible to people so it's digestible because people can't react to things in the same way because you're in a totally different time period. So I'm a fan of that. I think that's really cool. I mean, obviously there's a lot of gray area in there and it really depends on the person. Okay, in the situation. All right, so let's get back to other ways to distinguish yourself. I think color scheme is a great way to distinguish yourself. Not everybody does that, but Morandi, who is a still life painter, is like the king of subtlety. Like, this is not my cup of tea in terms of color schemes. Like, I'm not really somebody that's into like hyper subtlety, but I appreciate it. I think it's really beautiful. And so you will expect this when you see a Morandi still life painting. It's very subtle shifts, extremely muted colors, so many different versions of white. That is a quintessential Morandi painting. Okay, Tammy Dreiger saying, currently working on a portrait of my son, inspired by Kehinde Wiley, who painted President Obama's portrait. I love the way he used pattern and color. It feels very urban. Yeah, Kehinde Wiley, let me put the name into the chat box so you guys can look it up. So Kehinde Wiley, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen. He painted the Obama portrait and he's a really hot artist right now. And he beautiful patterns, gorgeous, just like sumptuous environments and backgrounds. Take a look at him. And actually, the person that painted the first lady's portrait was Amy Sherald. So I will put that in there as well. So it's Amy Sherald. Let's see. And she has a very distinctive style as well. Very graphic, very clean. So Michelle Obama's portrait. I mean, wow, talk about a sweet gig to land as an artist. Let's see. Joshua said, you should really watch In the Mood for Love. Is my opinion the greatest execution of a movie used as art. All right, I will definitely check that out. Okay, another Morandi piece. And there's a lot of gray in Morandi, so that's really what you expect to see. And by the way, if you guys want to really learn how to mix subtlety and color, my opinion is that gouache is a great material to learn how to do that. I think with oil painting, it's really complicated because with oil painting, unless you have a ton of experience, there's all kinds of technical problems that you can run into really quickly that make it hard to concentrate on that. But because gouache is a water-based material, really easy to clean, very easy to see the colors, I really recommend that you check out Alex Rowe's gouache painting tutorial on our site and on our YouTube because he's gouache master. Like I know that I shouldn't say this, but I honestly think this is like the best gouache painting tutorial I've ever seen anywhere. And yes, I know I produced it. I'm in it. Of course, I'm going to think that, but I think this is an amazing tutorial. So check this out. Now, on the flip side of Morandi, who is a still life painter with very subtle gray muted tones, you have somebody like Janet Fish. Total opposite of Morandi. Okay. And I like looking at these two artists together because Janet Fish, same subject, but could not be more different. And it's not just the colors, it's also the choice of the objects. If you look at Janet Fish's paintings, you'll see very quickly that she selects a lot of shiny glass objects, like super bright, saturated colors, even things like clear plastic wrapping to really play with that transparency. And so she has such a totally different sensibility. And I just love seeing how different artists can be. I mean, her colors are like crazy saturated, like the brightest cadmium red, cadmium yellow you can possibly come up with. So, so different than Morandi, but they're really distinctive. I mean, don't you guys feel like now, if you saw a Janet Fish painting or Morandi painting, you could say, that's Morandi. Really, really clear cut. That's what's going on with the style. By the way, if you want to know about ways to get creative on still lives, check out our still life tutorial where Alex Rowe and I, we get together and we arrange a still life together. We had so much fun. I mean, if anything, watch this video so you can see Alex pick up that jackfruit because that thing weighed like 30 pounds and it cost me like $30. I bought it at a Korean grocery store and then it like rotted later. It was very sad. It was like the story of the rotting jackfruit because I didn't know they could rot so fast. I really thought that the jackfruit would be around for a few days, but I guess I was totally wrong. But I know that some people think about still life as boring, but I think it's only boring if you let it be boring. And there's a lot of ways to make it super fun for yourself, but it does take effort. It takes a little bit of extra time. So I do think that still life is really helpful for learning painting. How many people out here paint? I'm just curious. How many of you guys work in oil painting or gouache or acrylic? Just jump in the chat box and let me know. Tell me what materials you like to use. But I know that I never really liked painting still lives. But then I had an oil painting teacher who made us only paint still lives for the whole semester. And that sounds boring to some people, but you know what? I learned how to oil paint. I really learned it. And I think if I had not done all the still life paintings, I don't think I would have learned oil painting remotely as well. Sometimes people want to tackle stuff like figure painting, and I'm like, not with oils. Oils, you need the training. Oh, Marlena likes gouache and watercolor. Yeah, gouache and watercolor. I don't know, Marlena, if you've ever used them together, but they are really wonderful as a combination. And I'm really trying, hopefully, at some point to get Alex to shoot a tutorial on how he combines gouache and watercolor because he's so good at both. And I don't feel like I'm very good at gouache. And so he would be much better to talk to about that. Okay, another way you can be distinctive is actually in terms of how you arrange your work in terms of the composition. This is a wonderful Spanish still life painter, Juan Sanchez Cotan. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And you've probably seen his work before. It's very famous, but he's basically known for these like hanging arrangements of still life. And I think they're unique because a lot of people, when they think about still life, they just think, oh, I put some things on a table. Okay, that's it. Pretty straightforward. But Cotan doesn't do that. He actually suspends these items from the top. And it's like, wow, nobody does that. And so part of having distinctive style is sort of going against the grain, like doing what other people are not doing in that same genre. Let's see. F. Kosh is saying, I've been working in acrylics lately, but I also do watercolor and just trying out pastels as well. Very cool. You know, I really think I want to give acrylic painting another run because I hated acrylic for pretty much my whole life. But then I watched Alex Rowe shoot this acrylic painting tutorial. And afterwards, I'm like, I think I should try this again. Because actually, I think the reason I was not good at it, well, number one, I was a terrible painter at the time. But number two, I didn't have half the supplies. Like when Alex explained slow dry medium and matte medium and all these other things you could put in, I just went, oh my God, how come nobody told me this before? So watch this tutorial. It's a great tutorial. He does an excellent job describing all the supplies. Sylvia, she's been saying, I mostly do digital for convenience, but also acrylics. Yeah, I need to get into some digital stuff. I'm a little bit hesitant, and plus my daughter always has the iPad, so it's not like I have a lot of iPad time available. Okay, let's talk now about how to actually find that style, because I think it's one thing to be able to recognize it, but I think it's another thing to say, okay, well, I know what it is that creates a distinctive style, but how exactly am I going to foster that? Because I think a lot of people get very stressed out when they feel that they're doing a lot of things and a lot of it's not really coming together. And it's like, oh man, this is never going to happen. It can definitely feel that way. And I have a lot of students at the art school I teach at who are very stressed out about that. And so the first thing I would say is try not to stress about that, but also, really, guys, don't force it. That is my biggest suggestion, because you know something, this happens a lot. I had somebody I went to art school with a million years ago, and when I was in art school with them, they were a total jack of all trades. And they were somebody I watched them and I was so jealous of their technical skills because they could do anything. They made puppets, they did pen and ink, they did painting, they did sculpture, like they made this like beautiful like wooden toy. I remember thinking like, "Oh my god, he is going to be like a superstar someday." Okay? And then what happened was when we got out of school, he just totally lost that mindset and was like, okay, now it's time to buckle down, have a style. And I remember that they had illustrated some instructional book or something, and it had that like very commercial illustration look that I had never really seen them do before. And I totally know why they did that. They did that because they thought that that was what the illustration industry wanted to see. And honestly, it was like the worst work I'd ever seen them do. And I know it's because they like forced that style. That style did not evolve over time. They just started to feel like professional pressure to like do that super recognizable style. And I have those images in my head. And I remember thinking, man, the stuff you were doing in art school was way better, way more fun, a lot more genuine, a lot more honest, and really engaging with the creative process. And so, again, like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of pressure on young artists to do that sooner and sooner. And you feel a lot of social pressure because it's like you start seeing all these artists who are like starting to get it together and you feel like you're not. But be patient and really embrace the process. I think that that's very important. It's hard to tune things out. I mean, I've been trying to check social media less because I don't like the way it makes me feel sometimes. And when I spend time away from it, I don't feel that like peer pressure so much. So basically, what I'm going to tell you guys to do, if you want to find your style, this is going to feel like a total contradiction, but you know what? It works. Try everything. Try every hat that's available to you in the whole universe. Try as many different media, as many different styles, different subjects, different time periods, different outfits, everything. And now that for a lot of people feels like bad advice because they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense because if I want to find my own style, shouldn't I just like laser focus on a couple things and get really good at that? I think that's terrible advice. I think that if you do that, what you're basically doing is shutting down all of your creative options. Like you're not even going to know what's available to you because you haven't bothered to get out there and look. Because that's pretty much what I did when I was in college and post grad, and even today. I'm always trying out so many new things. First of all, I just love learning new stuff. I love learning new techniques, discovering new materials, trying out different subjects. That's just in my personality. Not every artist is like that necessarily. But I know that if I had not gone through that process of trying on different identities artistically, I don't think that I would have the type of focus that I have now. And so if you guys are feeling like, I don't know what my style is, do the opposite of what you think you should do, which is get out there and just be a different person, be a different artist every single day. And then circle back and look at that stuff you made and ask yourself, like, where was I really happy and engaged? You're probably going to do a lot of stuff as an artist that you look back on and go, oh, never again. That's pretty much how I felt about wood carving, because I took this wood carving class over winter session when I was an art school student. Oh my God, that the class was really good, but I was bad at it. Like I could not do it, and I never have done it again. But it was still a good experience. I mean, I'm not like mad that I took that class or anything. Let's see. Marlena says, my watercolor class had to decide on a subject and do a series. I just had to do it. I recognized that I had a style on that subject. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think sometimes when you have certain situations like that, it's like it makes things a little bit more visible to you. Like sometimes it's very obvious to everybody around you, but to you, it's very, very hard to do. So I would just say, you guys, just do everything. Don't try to do that one way of drawing. Learn how to draw every way possible. So I'm going to show you guys my work from many, many decades. And I think afterwards, those of you who are feeling a little bit fragmented, like you don't have your own voice yet, you can feel better because you're going to see, oh my God, what a fragmented mess I was, as I still sort of am to a certain degree, because I don't know that I really ever settled on a style. I think some of my work recently has had some connections, but I don't know. You guys tell me. I'll show you the work and then you let me know what you think. Okay. Let's start in high school. This is what I was doing in sophomore year. In high school, I was really into surrealism. I loved Magritte and Dali, and that was like all I ever did. I never really did anything else. I mean, I always liked drawing things to look fairly representational. So this was a really big oil painting that I did, and I actually like got some eggs and cracked them, and then I like painted my tongue and this like stomach shape you're looking at. I think I like sculpted it out of like clay, and then I had like a skull that I drew the teeth from. And so this is such a blatant like I wish I was Salvador Dali type of thing, but that's okay. I think that's fine. I think if you're just trying things on, that's okay. I think as long as you're somewhat aware of that later on. Leon is saying, I really agree with this point. I think it applies to everything in life. A good analogy is like food. You never know what you like until you try it. Yeah, like have you guys ever looked at a new food and thought, ooh, that doesn't look good, and then tried it and been like, oh my God, this is so amazing? Like, see if you can think about something like that. Like, here's one dish that I get all the time. It's in Chinese, it's called pitang tofu. So it's basically like this duck egg. But the thing is, it's a really weird color. And if you've never seen it before, I could see why it might look strange because the egg white is like a clear brown jelly thing. And then the middle of the duck egg is this like sort of puke green color. And so it like doesn't look that appetizing, but it's like one of my favorite things. And our whole thing in my family is that my older daughter just wants the whole plate. Like we have to like tell her to slow down because she loves it so much. So Leon, I think that's a great analogy. I think it's very similar to food. Like you just don't write anything off until you've tried it. In fact, I have a rule with my kids that they have to try everything on the dinner table once if it's a new thing they've never had before. So I'll say, you just have to take one bite. And if you don't like it, you don't have to eat anything. But they cannot say to me, no, I will not try it. So I think that that's sort of similar. Okay, now when I got to college, I was doing like really conservative, realistic, figurative paintings. They're all pretty big. This one's like 5 feet or something like that. I was also doing a lot of portraits. This is a lithograph. And so I was like very into realism and very conservative, traditional media. And now that I look back on it, I don't know why I was so not creative back then. I guess I was just really hung up on developing my technique and just getting better at painting. That was largely my concern, although I really try to encourage my students in college now to not do that because I don't think it's a good idea to say to yourself, oh, when I am better at painting, then I'll tackle my content. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should be tackling both at the same time. And I wish somebody had bothered me about that because, wow, I really needed to be told that. All right, now here's another lithograph. And so you can see these are a little bit all over the place, which is fine. And then this is like totally a I wish I was Edward Hopper type of painting. And so you can see I did my fair share of like ripping off other artists and trying to do that. I mean, I wasn't like blatantly like thinking, oh, I want to be like Edward Hopper, but I remember when I brought this painting into critique, that was a very common comment. Like people would say, oh, it looks like an Edward Hopper painting because it's like a person alone in a room looking out into a window. I mean, that's a quintessential Edward Hopper image. Okay, here is a pen and ink illustration I did. This was for an illustration class I took, and we were supposed to illustrate a newspaper article that was about the Golden Gate Bridge. And I guess a lot of people commit suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was about the numbers, like it had hit some horrible milestone of like, oh, this many people have jumped in the past decade or so. And so I did this illustration of the Golden Gate Bridge and I put these like graves in the water. It's really dumb. This is why I did not become an illustrator. Like, I really am not good at this type of thing. But it's like, I don't do pen and ink. Like, I am not good at pen and ink. And so I never really worked this way again. But I don't resent that I did this drawing. I think I learned from this drawing a lot. If you guys want to see amazing pen and ink stuff, by the way, we have this upcoming tutorial. Let me see if I can pull up the link for you guys. You guys have a real treat here because Song Kang, who is actually a former student of mine, we shot a whole bunch of tutorials that I think are going to be really, really fun for you guys. Let me see. Here we go. Oh, I guess I just closed the chat box by accident. How did I do that? Oh, here we go. Let's restore the chat. Okay, here we go. Let's pop that out. Okay, so if you guys are wanting to learn pen and ink drawing, let me put that in here, pen and ink tutorial. This is upcoming. It's not released yet, but you can check that out because that's going to be really, really amazing. I'm very excited to release that tutorial. Okay, here's another illustration, again, that I did as an art school student. And this is so not my thing. Like, first of all, it's in chalk pastel, which I love chalk pastel drawings made by other people, but not the ones that I make. I find it very dusty and messy, and it's really easy to get very muddy. I mean, some people are extremely good at it. I'm not into it that much. Let's see. Ayodeshi saying, I love all your paintings. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. I don't think about myself as a very good painter because I have this one colleague, like I will admit, I am like intensely jealous of their paintings. Like I just want to cry when I see their paintings. And so I just feel like I have this like inferior complex because I think about painting. I'm like, oh, but that colleague, like it makes me sad. And you know what's even more frustrating? She's so nice, so I don't get to hate her. You know, it's like if she was mean, I could just be like, that person, they're so annoying. But instead, I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous, and you're nice. I don't get to hate you, so it's sort of a bummer. Anyway, Sylvia is saying, do you have any tips when to focus more on learning, copying a lot of art or photographs as opposed to trying to make your own stylized art? That's a good question. I think copying in terms of like when you say copy a Rembrandt painting, I think that's really good when you're just learning. Like if you just picked up oil painting, you don't have a lot of experience. I think doing a master copy is hugely helpful. I did this painting copy of a John Singer Sargent portrait when I was a senior in art school, and I learned so much. It's the most incredible way to dissect a painting and really break it down. I mean, it's really almost like stepping into the artist's brain temporarily. I think that's really good. I don't know what you mean specifically about copying photos, if you mean working from a photo as a reference or if you're just doing them to study from. I mean, if you're just talking about getting better at drawing, I don't think drawing from photos helps you. I say to a lot of people, look, before you really dig into drawing from photos, like as references, you got to log thousands of hours drawing from life. I draw from photos all the time, but I have decades of drawing from life to back that up. And a lot of people don't have that. And so it's very limiting when they try to work from photos. But I would just say, Sylvia, I think there's no right time. it's like if you have done a lot of master copies and you feel like, this is starting to get kind of repetitive, then it's time to move on. I think that everybody learns at a different pace, and you're really the one that can call the shots there, assuming that you're not in like a degree program. Okay. Now, post grad, this is funny because some of these prints actually remind me a little bit of the stuff that I was doing in high school. It's so weird how you never really get to escape yourself. Like you think you're, wow, doing all these new things, and then you look back, you're like, oh, I was sort of doing that 20 years ago. It's sort of reassuring, but sort of weird at the same time. So these are these surrealistic skulls. I was had this like little plastic skull, and I was sort of mangling it and changing it and rearranging it. I had a lot of fun doing that. And so here's another version. And this is when I really did when I first started making series of artworks. As you saw earlier, all these pieces that I showed you earlier from college, these are like one-off pieces. Like these are not part of a collective body of pieces. It was like one here, one there, one there. Now, post grad, that was not the case. So, for example, this piece and this piece, this is a suite of etchings that I did. I think I made like 20 of them. So, this is very targeted, cohesive body of work that I was working on. And I also did a large series of figure paintings. And this eventually ended up being my portfolio for graduate school. But I was also doing a lot of random stuff. Like I would just do these like random still lives for no reason. I guess I was trying to get better. Although, isn't it funny? Because I look at this and I'm like, who is this person? But then I'm like, dude, you just did that in August. Like you just did a domestic still life painting a couple months ago. And here you were doing it in like 2001. So again, it feels unrelated, but you can't escape yourself. I should say that in a more positive way. That does not sound very positive. Okay. I was also doing these prints because I just love nature. I love objects. And these were these Chinese lantern plants that I had gotten at the grocery store. And I thought they were so beautiful and I love the color. And so I just did a couple of these nature studies. And these, again, this was just like, I feel like doing this. Okay. Like there was nothing focused about it. My MFA program got very focused for obvious reasons. I was doing a thesis project, working on my degree. And so this was a part of my thesis, which was all thematically based on this idea of digging for things. So they were all images of various groups of people and different formations digging in landscapes. And it was largely prints. So I did woodcuts like what you see here. I did some intaglio prints. So this has like etching and aquatint. And so I like to work with multiple media under the same umbrella of the same subject. So these are all diggers, but they're all articulated in different media. And these are monotypes. These are pretty big. This is probably like 24 inches by 36 inches. And I think you can see most of the figures have a shadowy presence. You don't really see their faces. It's pretty stark contrast. So even though these images are different materials, I did carry over some stylistic choices from all of those. And then I also accompanied this with a sculpture installation. And I'll let me show you guys a little bit of a detail. And so these were these very distorted, very almost emaciated figures that I was working with. This was very new for me. I was not really like a hardcore sculptor ever. And so this was a hard project for me. Like a lot of the people I went to my master's degree with had done an undergraduate degree in sculpture and really knew what they were doing. And I did not. So this was very new for me at the time. Let's see. Tra Pace 150 is saying, I'm in a weird space where I need to get better at drawing, figure painting, but I'm not really sure where to begin. Do I stop doing personal projects and focus on anatomy and color theory? I think you should do both. I think you could, for example, fluctuate between the two, or you could just say, okay, month of December, color theory. Month of January, anatomy. It depends on the person because I'm the type of person, I get bored really fast. And so if you said to me, Clara, December is color theory month, I would be like, screw you, I'm not doing that. But some people, maybe that's a little bit easier to break it up a little bit. But I think sometimes it's just finding the rhythm that works for you. If you feel that the personal projects are lacking because of your lack of skills in, say, anatomy and color theory, maybe you do need to take a break from those and go back and beef up your skills and come back to it. But if you're like on fire with your personal projects, don't interrupt that for the study of anatomy and color theory, because there's a time and a place for that. I don't know if you're in a degree program, if you're working independently. I mean, I think if you're working independently, it's like whatever flies for you. In school, it's a little different because you're taking classes and stuff like that. But I think you have to sort of base it on how your personal projects are going. Start there. Don't think about, I should do this, I should do that. Everybody knows this. Just look at the personal work. And if you really are struggling with the personal work because you're like, oh, I wish I could paint the biceps better, but I can't for this one painting, then yeah, go back and do some of the anatomy. Okay, now after my MFA, I did a project called Waiting, because it's confusing. I did another project called Wading, Wading. And this project surprised me because I did these very graphic figures with very flat, defined shadows. And this surprised me because I love shading, I love tone and lighting. Those are all things that I just like actively embrace. And so when I did this project, which had intaglio prints and also oil paintings, images like this, which were very empty, super sparse, extremely graphic, I was like, what? Like, who is this? I don't know who this person is. But it seemed to make sense at the time for the subject matter that I was doing, because I wanted to show this idea of waiting for things, because I think we wait for different types of things for different periods. Like you're waiting at the grocery store for 5 minutes to check out. You're waiting your whole life for this one thing to happen. I think that that's a really cool subject. And then my next project was waiting people in water. And this one is more what I think is my characteristic, which is like luscious blacks and beautiful shading. Like that's more my personality. So I felt like the one before was quite removed. Let's see, Giovanni Batuyang, sorry if I mispronounced that. Any tips for AP 2D art? I have never taught AP art before, so I don't have a lot of specifics about that. However, I'm guessing this is probably fairly similar to preparing an art school portfolio. So, what I'm going to recommend is that you go to our art school portfolios section. There's a huge section, there's many, many pages, and it has all types of resources and content. So, I would go there. So, I'm going to show you that. So, art school portfolios guide, go to that, and that site has videos, it has articles, it has examples. I would go there because we have the videos on YouTube, but they're not formatted with the articles, and I think you'll get more if you go to the website. Divine Arts Goddess is saying, I love this work. Thank you. Yeah, this series of work, I think out of a lot of work that I've done, has probably been the most popular because I think it's the least emotionally charged. Like it's easy to look at this image, I think, compared to some of my other work, which I'll show you later. But I know a lot of people do think this work has dark undertones. I'm not saying it's rainbows and sunshine necessarily, but I think there is a somewhat calming element to this work that a lot of people don't see in my other pieces. So anyway, this one felt more like my personality in a lot of ways. Marlena saying, thanks for sharing your transformation as an artist. I love the spatial relationships in your digging and waiting series. Thank you, Marlena. I'm glad to see that that's helping you. Yeah, you know something, guys? I never went back to sculpture. I mean, I do sculpture today to work through ideas, to think about different ways of doing things. And sometimes I just get clay just to sculpt up my ideas, but I'm not really like a sculptor. Like, I have a friend who really is a sculptor, and I don't think like her at all. And so I think sculpture has helped me become a better two-dimensional artist. And actually, that was the reason why my former professor actually suggested to me to do my master's in sculpture, because they said, Well, when I look at your paintings, actually, I think more about sculpture. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should just do that. And I did think for a little while, oh, maybe I really am a sculptor. I'm not. Like I realized later, I'm not really a sculptor. Anyway, this project was followed up by a project called Falling. And when I'm talking about disturbing images, this is basically it. So, for a lot of people, the work is very charged emotionally, which it's supposed to be. That's the effect, because the project really was about my personal experience with depression, the emotions associated with it, coping with it, living with it on a daily basis. And it was probably my biggest, longest, most ambitious body of work. It lasted 4 years. And I did 50 self portraits. This is one of them. Here's another one. And they're all the same size, they're all the same material. A lot of people think that they're charcoal drawings, but they're not. They're actually done with etching ink, which I just spread with my fingers. It's literally finger painting. And then I go back in with a lithographic crayon to work on details. And I also do a lot of scraping because I did these drawings on Duralar, which is almost like acetate. It's like a strong plastic. And I like that a lot. It's much better than paper because paper can fall apart in 2 seconds. So I like this a lot better. All right, so I did 50 of these. And by the way, if you guys want to see more of my work, let me show you. I'll put in the link to my website so you guys can see everything. So, link to my website. If you want to see the complete version of all of these pieces, you can definitely check it out there. Okay, and then within the same project, I actually did end up making these beeswax sculptures, but oddly enough, this part of the project drove me nuts. Like, you have projects that just like hate you actively and want to make your life really hard. That's exactly what this was, because for the longest time, I kept saying, oh, I really want to do some sculptures, but nothing was coming together. And I made these beeswax sculptures. And I was like, I don't like them still. And it took me so long. Like, I was so angry at myself for not being able to figure this out. And then eventually I realized that I didn't want the sculptures. I wanted a photo of the sculptures. So I took the beeswax sculptures, I lit them in a room with a very, very dim light. And then the final version of the work was actually a print of the photo of the sculpture, which was better because I did not like the sculptures as objects. They looked bad. So I ended up doing that. And again, because I'm crazy, I did 50 of these. So I sculpted 50 of these out of ceramic clay. I cast them into beeswax with silicone rubber molds. If you want to see the process, it's on my website. You can see process images of the silicone molds, the beeswax. You can see the whole thing beginning to end. And then I also did a lot of figure drawings later. This was a quick figure study, which for some reason everybody on the internet likes. I get so many requests, people asking me about this image, if I have a print of it or whatever. People want to put it on their album cover. I don't know why. It's this one sketch. Anyway, this was a precursor to these very large figure drawings I did. These are like 7 feet by 4 feet. They're gigantic. And all I can say, I am never making artwork that's taller than me ever again because it's a pain in the butt to get on a ladder and have to work like that. It's really, really hard. But maybe this detail will get you to see the material a little bit better. Like if you look at the hair, you see how it's like all streaky. That's me just like pushing the etching ink, which is very tacky. Etching ink is like tar. It's very tacky and very stiff. And so I really liked it a lot because it had a lot of substance to it. And then this is work that I did in 2016, which was based on these images of these elderly figures. One of my friends, Sheila, was the model for this. And this, again, pretty different than the other stuff because this was all drawn on tissue paper, which was very fragile. And actually, the tearing of the drawing was an accident. Like, I did not mean to do that at first. And then my mindset was, you know what, if this stuff wants to tear, let's just let it tear. And I had a lot of fun almost sculpting the paper. That was really wonderful. So a lot of these accidents are hugely important. And so this project to me, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I feel that this work looks incredibly different and I don't feel that I have a style. tell me in the chat box if you think I have a style or not, or just what's your take? Because again, I'm so in my own head about this that to me, all this work looks totally different. But maybe some of you are looking at this saying, oh, Claire, shut up. This all looks like you. I have no idea. It's really hard to say. And then here's another version. And so you can see these pieces obviously are within one body that's supposed to be cohesive. But the thing is, though, then I'll visit Vancouver and I'll do a colored pencil drawing of a cafeteria with Chinese restaurants. And so this is again why I think my social media presence on like Instagram has not been as successful, because I am a little bit all over the place stylistically. Like, you don't know that you're going to get the same thing from me every time on Instagram. And I think for some people, they don't like that. They don't like the lack of predictability. And I feel like a lot of people do subscribe to my Instagram when they see something like this, because they like the material, they like the drawing technique. And so if I post something like this, it feels so unrelated, because these are some drawings that I did when I was traveling in Taiwan and Guangzhou. And a lot of this work, like this work was done about 3 years later than this. So the time difference is actually not a lot. It's pretty quick. And actually, if you want to see my technique for traveling and drawing at the same time, we do have this wonderful tutorial on artprof.org and on YouTube as well. When me, Casey, Eloise, and Lauren, we traveled to Guangzhou to teach classes and workshops, but then we, in our spare time, shot these tutorials. So you can see us walking around the fish market, the Chinese medicine market. We had a blast. So this is a really fun tutorial. You can see some of my techniques in there. But then also I'm doing stuff like this bread in watercolor. And again, this tutorial, which is going to be coming out hopefully soon, was me painting with watercolors in Utah. And the idea behind this tutorial was for me to pick a material that I am terrified of. In this case, it's watercolor, and to confront it. And also to confront subject matter I'm not good at, which is landscape. Landscape is not my thing. Like, I have never been a landscape painter. I appreciate landscape painting for sure, but I'm not good at it. And so I thought, okay, let's take two things I am not good at, watercolor and landscape, and let's tackle that. And so the idea about this tutorial was that you're watching me learn, which I know that's the opposite of what a tutorial is supposed to be. Tutorial is supposed to be somebody who's really good at what they're doing, showing you how to do it, and you really learning something from that. This is a weird tutorial because I just fall on my face a million times, and I talk about analyzing my process and looking at my progress and thinking about why I'm doing things and why this didn't work. And so it's sort of a strange tutorial, but hopefully you guys will find it fun. Oh, Ayudeshi loves my randomness on Instagram. Okay, good. So there are some people who don't mind. I feel like the more stereotypical reaction to social media is that you do want to see pretty similar, cohesive things. I'm not as cohesive as some people, but whatever. Let's see. Traha Pace 150. I love your work. I love to see artists experiment. Many artists I was a fan of when I was younger, I no longer look at because years later they're still making the same thing. I feel the exact same way. Like, I actually had some artists that I was following on Instagram, and then they just kept doing the same thing like over and over again. And I just was like, really? Another one of these? Do I have to see it? Like, I didn't feel that I was gaining anything new looking at those pieces. Like, after a while, they all start to look the same. And I really admire people like Degas and Matisse, because Matisse was like going blind, and he was so well known for his oil paintings, but later on, because he was going blind, he couldn't paint anymore. He started doing those beautiful paper cutouts, and those are gorgeous pieces. Degas was, goodness, also going blind, and so he started working with sculpture, and some of his sculptures are some of my favorite pieces. And so I'm a huge fan of that. I don't think that that's the typical way that a lot of people think about that, because I do think the trend more nowadays, I'm sure it might change or will change for sure in the coming years, is people say, okay, this person is an absolute master genius of this one technique. And I admire that. Okay. That takes serious focus concentration, training to be able to do something like that. I have never been able to be one of those artists because I get bored and I want to try something new. Like, I have this one colleague, we call her the litho queen because she is like a master of lithography, knows everything there is to know. I am never going to have that level of expertise that she has in that area. But I don't want to do that. Like, I would do lithography for like a year and then want to do something else. So it really depends on your personality. Let's see. Are artists Zenna S like changes as you are not the same person every moment? Yeah, I mean, I'm so not the same person that I was even like 2 years ago. Things change so quickly. And so it's really impossible, I think, if you, assuming you want to keep growing as an artist. I mean, not everybody cares about that so much. And I know for some people, if your artwork really is your living. Like for an illustrator, you would like your career would die. Like if you as an illustrator started just making all kinds of random stuff that was all over the place and fragmented and you would not be hired again anymore because art directors don't want that. They don't want to have a surprise. They want to know when they hire you to do an illustration that they're going to end up with a certain type of result. And so it does depend on your organization of your career as an artist. I teach, that is my bread and butter. And so that frees me up to do whatever I want with my artwork. I have never had somebody tell me what to do as an artist, and I have that freedom because I teach. Other people do, other people don't. Of course, there's trade offs for a lot of people. It really depends on who you are. And I think that for some people, making a living, making the work makes a lot more sense. On the other hand, you do have people bothering you about it. Like I had a colleague who had a very successful gallery curator. I mean, their work sold for thousands of dollars in high-end galleries. And I know for a long time, they were doing these cityscape paintings in oils that sold very well. They were like hot paintings. And then they said to me, I got tired of doing those and I wanted to do something else. And when I told my art dealer, she nearly had a heart attack because she's like really upset that I wasn't going to make these super popular, really expensive paintings anymore because from an industry point of view, that's not very helpful. And so I'm not trying to say that one way is better than the other. You just have to figure out what works for you because I know that if I had to really cater to that, for me, that would feel very creatively stifling. I'm lucky that I'm in a situation where I have that choice. Not everybody does. And I know for some illustrators, it really is their livelihood. So you have to think about it that way. Let's see. Art Zena saying, refer to the development of Picasso. Yeah, guys, look up the Picasso. It's a painting of a wedding. Let me put this in the chat box. So look up an early painting by Picasso of a wedding. Can't remember the name of it, but it's very representational. It's sort of like brownish orange tone. I should have put a slide of it in here, but anyway, it's a really, really cool painting, and it just changes the way you think about things. Like another good person to look up would be Jackson Pollock, because his work was not always splatter paintings. He was doing totally different types of stuff earlier in his career. All right. I'd like to remind you that you can purchase a portfolio critique. You can talk to us over Skype for a fee. This is really excellent, I think, especially those of you who are working independently and it's hard to get feedback and to get guidance on where you're going. So I encourage you guys to check that out. We have samples on the page that you can watch. I also do Instagram critiques. I also critique artist websites. That way you guys have a sense of how to organize your professional material if that's something that you're interested in. And I want to thank our top supporters: Johnny Mack, Lahona Rampton, Ross Hines, Sally Webster. You guys are awesome. You're wonderful. We cannot do this without you. If you would like to be a top supporter of Art Prof, keep all of our content 100% free, go to patreon.com/artprof. We would love for you to support us, even if it's $1 a month, $10 a month. It all matters because, wow, we know how to stretch a penny here at Art Prof. But we would like to keep doing this for you, but we have budgets, we have expenses that we have to cover to produce this content, so that would really help a lot. Also, you get rewards on Patreon. And on top of that, everybody who is a Patreon supporter, you are automatically entered every single month into this Patreon monthly giveaway. Now, this is really cool. You could donate just $1 a month. You're already in the giveaway and you get to pick from a prize. So whoever wins the giveaway, you go to the page which has all the prizes and you can pick a portfolio critique, an Instagram critique, a website critique. You might choose mystery artwork from me, mystery artwork from Deepti, mystery art supplies could show up on your doorstep. You have no idea what's going to happen. So, anyway, I'd encourage you guys to take a look at that because these portfolio critiques, like this one, Instagram and website critiques, normally we charge like $200 for these. But if you're in the Patreon giveaway and you win it, you could win that for $1. Like that's all it is. And we don't have a ton of patrons at this point. So actually the likeliness that you win is going to win is actually fairly on the high side. Who knows? Maybe we'll have 1,000,000 donors and then I don't know. I don't know if we're going to do that. And you probably won't have as much of a chance. But anyway, I hope you guys will consider supporting us because we love chatting with you. I love the conversations we have together online, but we have to buy equipment, audio stuff. We have to pay staff. We have to pay for supplies. Oh my God, you would not believe what it takes to run this. And I would really appreciate that. So thank you so much, you guys, for showing up. And I'll see you next time.